a mission, appealing, a beckoning, a summons or appointment from God to serve Him in a specific way for a specific purpose. A calling.
Jesus.
All of us as true Christians have been called by God.
Amen.
Consecration is not giving over the calling in life to God, but the separation from all other callings and give over ourselves for God's use. When we are the right people before God, we can do whatever task He sends and wherever He puts us.
Amen.
In doing so, we discover and affirm His calling for us.
Jesus, thank you, Lord.
Serve God by doing common actions in a heavenly spirit.
Jesus.
And then, if your daily calling only leaves cracks and crevices of time, fill them with holy service.
Yes.
Persistent calling upon the name of the Lord breaks through every stronghold of the devil. For nothing is impossible with God.
Amen.
For the true Christian, in these troubled times, there is simply no other way.
Amen.
Simon moved from calling Jesus Master to calling Him Lord.
Amen.
Listening often allows us to see the works of God firsthand and then draw closer to Him.
Amen.
And to take with us this week, God's call of individuals to salvation made possible by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. His call to salvation also involves believers in the high calling of living their lives in service to others.
Amen.
God calls people to serve Him. Jeremiah was appointed by God as a spokesman to the world.
Amen.
God has a purpose for each Christian, each true Christian.
Yes.
But some people are appointed by God for specific kinds of works. Samson, David, John the Baptist, and Paul were called to do particular jobs for God. Whatever work you do should be done to the glory of God.
Amen.
If God gives you a specific task, accept it cheerfully and do it with diligence. If God has not given you a specific call or assignment, then seek to fulfill the mission common to all true believers: to love, obey, and serve God until His guidance becomes clearer for you.
Amen.
Being Christ's disciples involves firm commitment. The men Jesus chose already knew Him. He had talked to Peter and Andrew previously and had been preaching in the area. When Jesus called them, they knew what kind of man He was and were willing to follow Him.
Amen.
They were not in a hypnotic trance when they followed Him, but were thoroughly convinced that following Him would change their lives forever.
Amen.
James and John, His brother, along with Peter and Andrew, were the first disciples that Jesus called to work with Him. Jesus' call motivated these men to leave their jobs immediately. They didn't make excuses why this wasn't or isn't the right time or a good time. They left and followed Him. Jesus calls each one of us to follow Him. When Jesus asks us to serve Him, we must be like the disciples and do it at once.
Amen.
God calls people to represent him in the world. Jesus called his 12 disciples. He didn't draft them, force them, or ask them to volunteer. He chose them to serve in a special way. Jesus calls us today. He doesn't twist our arm or make us do anything we don't want to do. We can choose to join him or remain behind. When Jesus calls you to follow him, how do you respond?
Jesus.
The list of Jesus' 12 disciples doesn't give many details, probably because there weren't many impressive details to tell. Jesus called people from all walks of life: fishermen, political activists, tax collectors. He called common people and uncommon leaders, rich and poor, educated and uneducated. Today, many people think that only certain people are fit to follow Christ. But this was not the attitude of the Master himself.
Amen.
God can use anyone, no matter how insignificant he or she appears. When you feel small and useless, remember that God uses and Jesus calls ordinary people to do their extraordinary work. Amen.
Amen.
We thank the Lord for his word thus far. And now we'll be blessed with one more musical selection, and then we will have a word from our pastor. Pray that all hearts and minds open to receive what thus saith the Lord this morning.